For more than 2 decades, Dwyane Wade has been remembered in the American imagination as one of basketball's most complete success stories. 3 NBA championships, a Finals MVP in 2006, 13 All-Star selections, and an identity deeply tied to the Miami Heat dynasty built him into something larger than an athlete. He became a symbol of resilience, of explosive drives through contact, of a player who could turn pressure into performance when everything was on the line. Fans remember the roaring arenas, the championship parades, and the moments when he stood at the center of basketball history with calm certainty. In that public image, Wade appears almost fully formed, as if greatness was his natural state. Yet that version is only what the world was allowed to see. Beneath the highlights and trophies existed another reality, one far less visible, where the cost of greatness accumulated quietly. While the public watched victories, he lived through years of physical strain, emotional pressure, and personal responsibility that rarely made headlines. The man behind the legend was not separated from his success, but shaped by what it demanded from him when the lights were off. The idea of a double existence, Wade's life, when viewed beyond sports commentary, can be understood as a continuous balancing act between two versions of himself. One was the public figure, composed, competitive, and expected to deliver under pressure. The other existed in silence, carrying fatigue, uncertainty, and private emotional weight. This duality did not emerge suddenly. It developed gradually as fame intensified. The more successful he became, the more expectations followed, and the more he had to compartmentalize his inner experiences. On the court, hesitation was not an option. Off the court, recovery was never just physical. It was emotional and psychological as well. Many elite athletes experience this split between public performance and private vulnerability. But Wade's case feels especially pronounced because of how early success locked him into that identity. He learned to function in high-pressure environments while still carrying unresolved emotional layers from earlier life experiences. Over time, these two states of being coexisted without fully merging. The public saw consistency and strength, while privately there were moments of doubt, exhaustion, and reflection that never entered the highlight reels. His existence became less about contradiction and more about coexistence of two necessary selves. Growing up in Chicago's South Side environment, Wade's early life in Chicago's South Side shaped much of his emotional framework long before basketball defined him. The environment he grew up in was marked by instability, economic difficulty, and social challenges that forced many children to mature faster than expected. In neighborhoods where uncertainty was routine, children often learned to observe carefully before they learned to trust openly. For Wade, this context created a sense of alertness that became part of his personality. Life was not structured around comfort or predictability, but around adaptation. The absence of stability meant that expectations for safety were often low, and resilience became a daily requirement rather than an exceptional trait. Within such conditions, emotional expression is often limited, not because feelings are absent, but because survival takes priority over vulnerability. Wade's early experiences in this environment did not define him in a simple or one-dimensional way, but they contributed to a mindset where endurance and awareness became central. Long before basketball courts and stadium lights, his understanding of life was shaped by the need to remain steady in unstable surroundings, a lesson that would follow him into adulthood. Maternal absence and emotional complexity. One of the most influential aspects of Wade's childhood was the instability surrounding his mother's presence in his life. Her struggles with addiction created cycles of presence and absence that left emotional imprints on him during formative years. At times she was physically there, yet emotionally distant, and at other times she was completely absent. For a child, This unpredictability can create confusion about reliability and trust. Wade grew up without a consistent emotional anchor, which meant he had to interpret love and absence simultaneously. These experiences did not simply create sadness. They shaped how he understood connection itself. When care is inconsistent during childhood, it often leads to heightened awareness of loss and separation. In Wade's case, this translated into a quiet internalization of emotions rather than outward expression. Instead of openly reacting, he learned to contain and process feelings internally. This did not make him detached, but it made him self-reliant in emotional regulation from a young age. The absence of stability in maternal presence became a foundational emotional pattern that influenced how he later navigated relationships, responsibility, and even success. Early emotional adaptation and survival mindset. As Wade grew older, he began to develop coping mechanisms that allowed him to function within instability. These were not conscious strategies, but adaptive responses to his environment. One of the most significant adaptations was emotional containment. Rather than expressing vulnerability openly, he learned to minimize its outward visibility. This does not imply emotional absence. Instead, it reflects a learned behavior where internal feelings are processed privately. Children in unpredictable environments often develop this kind of emotional self-management because external support systems are inconsistent. For Wade, this translated into a personality that appeared composed even during internal turbulence. He also developed a strong sense of independence, shaped by the understanding that relying too heavily on others could lead to disappointment. This mindset created resilience, but it also came with emotional costs. While it helped him navigate early life challenges, it also contributed to a pattern where internal struggles were rarely shared. Over time, this approach became deeply embedded in his identity, influencing how he approached pressure, responsibility, and personal relationships later in life. Masculinity shaped through suppression and endurance. Wade's emotional development also intersected with broader cultural expectations of masculinity, particularly in environments where strength is often associated with emotional restraint. From an early age, he learned that vulnerability was not easily expressed in his surroundings. Instead, endurance and control were more visible markers of strength. This does not mean he lacked emotional depth, but rather that expression was shaped by context. Over time, this contributed to a personal identity built around persistence and composure. In high-pressure environments, such as competitive sports, these traits became advantages. However, they also meant that emotional burdens were often carried internally, rather than shared externally. The idea of being strong became intertwined with not showing distress, even when it existed. This internal framework followed him into adulthood, where expectations only intensified. While it helped him succeed in elite basketball, it also reinforced a pattern of self-reliance that made emotional openness more difficult. The result was a version of strength that was effective but costly, built on the continuous management of internal emotional weight that rarely had space for release. Basketball as structure, escape, and identity formation. Basketball entered Wade's life as more than a sport. It became a structured environment where chaos could be organized into rules, timing, and measurable outcomes. Unlike the unpredictability of his early surroundings, the court offered clarity. There were boundaries, roles, and immediate consequences, which created a sense of control that contrasted with earlier instability. As his talent developed, basketball became both an escape and a form of identity formation. It was a space where discipline translated directly into progress, and where emotional intensity could be channeled into performance. This did not erase personal struggles, but it provided a framework for managing them. The court became a place where focus replaced uncertainty, and where action replaced reflection. Over time, basketball stopped being just an activity and became a defining structure in his life. It shaped how he understood purpose, effort, and achievement. More importantly, it reinforced the idea that control could be achieved through preparation and execution, even when internal experiences remained complex and unresolved. Rise to NBA prominence and public identity, Wade's entry into the NBA marked a shift from potential to visibility. As he developed into a key figure for the Miami Heat, especially during the 2006 championship run, his public identity solidified rapidly. The Finals MVP performance elevated him into elite status, and he became associated with clutch performance, athletic explosiveness, and leadership under pressure. With each season, his reputation expanded, and he became not just a player, but a symbol of competitive excellence. Public perception often simplifies such careers into narratives of success, but the reality is a continuous cycle of adaptation, injury management, and psychological pressure. As fame grew, expectations intensified, and every performance carried additional weight. This transformation into a public figure meant that personal space became limited, and identity became increasingly tied to external validation. While this brought recognition and achievement, it also reduced the separation between the individual and the performer. The more successful he became, the more his identity was shaped by public expectation rather than private experience, reinforcing the dual existence that defined much of his career. Peak success and the physical cost of greatness, the 2006 championship, is often remembered as Wade's defining moment, but it also marked the beginning of a more physically demanding phase of his career. His style of play, aggressive drives, frequent contact, and explosive movement, placed significant strain on his body. Over time, injuries accumulated, particularly involving his knees, which became a recurring challenge throughout his career. Success at the highest level in professional sports often comes with physical trade-offs, and Wade's experience reflects that reality clearly. The same intensity that made him exceptional also contributed to long-term physical wear. While fans witnessed greatness, they did not see the recovery routines, the pain management, or the constant adjustments required to continue competing. Each season became a negotiation between capability and limitation. Even during peak years, there was an underlying awareness that performance came at a physical cost. This tension between achievement and bodily sacrifice became an ongoing part of his career narrative, shaping how longevity and excellence coexisted in his professional life. Injuries, endurance, and personal sacrifice. As Wade's career progressed, injuries became a defining aspect of his journey. Rather than a single setback, they formed a recurring pattern that required continuous adaptation. Managing physical limitations while maintaining elite performance demanded discipline and resilience. Rehabilitation periods were not just physical recovery phases, but also psychological tests of patience and identity. For an athlete whose life was built around movement and competition, forced pauses could create internal challenges as well. Yet Wade consistently returned, adjusting his game to accommodate physical realities while still contributing at a high level. This adaptability extended his career, but also reflected the broader theme of sacrifice. Success at his level was never isolated from cost. It was built alongside it. Each comeback carried both determination and awareness of limitation. Over time, endurance became as central to his identity as performance itself, showing that greatness in professional sports is often sustained not only through peak ability, but through the willingness to continue despite accumulated strain, family life, public scrutiny, and personal responsibility beyond basketball. Wade's personal life also unfolded under public attention. His experiences with marriage, fatherhood, and later raising his children placed him in situations where private decisions became publicly discussed. These aspects of his life added complexity to his identity as he navigated responsibility not only as an athlete, but also as a parent and public figure. The challenges of maintaining personal relationships under public scrutiny can be significant, especially when combined with the pressures of a demanding career. At different points in his life, Wade faced transitions that required emotional adjustment and personal reflection. Fatherhood, in particular, became an important part of his identity, shaping how he understood responsibility beyond sports. His support for his daughter, including her public journey as Dwyane Wade, also placed him in broader cultural conversations about family and acceptance. These experiences revealed another dimension of his life, one that extended far beyond basketball achievements and into the realm of personal growth and evolving understanding. Reflection on legacy, identity, and human complexity, when viewed in totality, Wade's life cannot be reduced to either triumph or struggle alone. It exists in the intersection between both. His legacy is not only defined by championships or highlights, but also by the emotional and physical costs that accompanied them. The idea of dual existence, public success, and private complexity remains central to understanding his journey. Like many individuals who reach elite levels in their field, his story reflects both accomplishment and sacrifice. What makes his narrative compelling is not perfection, but the coexistence of strength and vulnerability across time. His career demonstrates how greatness is often built through persistence in the face of limitations, rather than absence of them. In the end, his story is less about resolution and more about continuity, the ongoing effort to balance identity, responsibility, and personal truth within the demands of public life. It is a reminder that behind celebrated achievements are human experiences that are layered, unfinished, and deeply complex.